welcome back to the Diet Diaries. I don't know what episode number this is. I'm here with another really special guest. About probably at this point, it's going to be over a month ago, I had on a former client, Alyssa Hote, and today I'm back with another one, Carissa Ambis, who's also super, super special. One, because she's an amazing client and person and now friend, and two, because she's also taken the best care of our dog, Izzy. That's actually how we met. It was kind of like through my mom who'd found Carissa, and then Carissa and I connected. And so we have this really kind of special relationship that just really means a lot to me. So I'm super grateful to have her here today to talk about her experience with food and body image and where she started and where she is and what coaching was like and how it's impacted her life and what's still challenging and kind of all of the things. So yeah, hi Carissa.
Hi, Jordana. Thank you for having me. I'm
Thank
nervous, excited, honored, all the feelings.
all the things, all the things.
Yeah.
And so as always, we're going to keep it super casual and just like you and I talking, and maybe someone's listening, who even knows. So I thought we could start by just sort of talking about what were sort of, I guess, maybe your earliest experiences or your first memories of struggling with eating food and body image.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When I was thinking about this, because I figured you might ask this, I was trying to pinpoint, where I kind of first became aware of my body and, what people thought about my body and, kind of I guess, try to determine when it all started. The earliest memory that I have, I guess, is probably when I was in, gosh, I would say probably like late elementary school, early middle school, just being bullied a lot for my weight. I was always kind of what I would consider a chubby kid, not something that really bothered me, I guess, until other people started to point it out to me. There's pictures of me when I was younger where I had a little belly, I had chubby cheeks, I was this chubby kid. But in those pictures, I was happy. I was not covering up my body. I was, gosh, it just seems like that was me and I was okay with it. And then when other people kind of started pointing it out to me, I think that's where I really started to internalize all of that and struggles started. So bullying, my grandma, I mean, bless her heart, she had good intentions, but she would always say, like, oh, have you gained weight? Or you look like maybe you put on a little bit of weight. I also remember when I was at the pediatrician, I probably was maybe 12 or 13 at the time. And she flat out said to me, she's like, you're getting heavy, you need to cut out soda. So
Wow.
that was the thing that she had said to me, and I never really thought of it until she said that, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I need to cut out soda,
Okay.
because at that point people were noticing my body and commenting on my body. So
Isn't it like it's so unbelievable how people just think that they can do that, right? I mean, that's something that we still struggle with, but even I know that people are doing it with good intentions. So I do understand that, but it's like intent versus impact. And it's so damaging. Like you felt comfortable in your own body, like inherently you
yeah.
felt good. You wouldn't have been able to label this at the time, but there was like self-trust. There was just kind of like an ease and a
Yeah.
comfort. And then someone else tells you what's
Mhm.
wrong with you. And suddenly it like blows the whole thing up. And then you have to like spend the rest of your life rebuilding it.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, when these things were being pointed out to me, it was always, at least to me, it came from, it had like kind of a negative connotation to it. Like it was not okay to be a chubby kid. It was not okay to be, a little bit on the heavier side.
Right.
And so that's, of course, when I started to associate, okay, well, being heavy, being fat, having fat is bad.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that definitely led to a spiral of me just doing everything and anything that I could to not be that, to
Yeah.
be smaller.
Right.
um yeah, so
And so what did that look like for you? Like the way, like how you reacted and responded to what people were telling you?
yeah, well, I mean, with the pediatrician telling me to cut out soda, that was something that surprisingly was very easy for me. I was able to do that. I switched to only water, and that kind of stuck with me well into my adult years as well. I think it was a very, very long time before I had soda again. I think at that point it had just become, I just didn't care for the taste of it anymore after not having it for so long. But other than that, I mean, there were times where I remember from middle school, kind of going into the early years of high school and, again, being bullied for my weight, just being tired of it and not wanting to deal with that anymore. So I made a point I was going to lose that weight. I was going to do whatever I could to be the smallest version of myself that I could. And so back then, what that looked like for me, I was never an active kid. So exercise and moving my body was really not a part of that equation at that point in
Okay.
time. So it all fell onto food and my relationship with food. So at that point in time, I tried my hardest to eat as little as possible, like go as long as possible as I could between meals. I was thinking back to it last night when, preparing for this interview. I wasn't tracking calories at that point, but just thinking back to what I would eat and how often I would eat, I was probably eating anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day,
Wow.
as a 14, 15-year old
Right.
who's still growing,
Still growing. It's exactly what
who,
I was
who
just thinking.
needs the
Yes.
energy, who needs the nutrition. So that was not there at all. And it worked. Of course it worked because I was in a huge calorie deficit, even with not being active. And it worked back then, what I thought was so well, that all of the boys in school who bullied me turned around and then wanted to talk to me and go out with me and do other things that teenage boys
Mhm.
want to do with good
Mhm.
looking girls.
Mhm.
So that also kind of reinforced the whole, this is what I need to do in order to be accepted. This is the right way to do it, or I'm getting the positive outcome that I'm so desperately was looking for. So that kind of reinforced those habits. I also remember when I had like my first, what I would consider my first serious boyfriend. We were in kind of a long distance relationship. He lived in the Poconos, so I would spend weekends, at his house, because obviously I was in school during the week. And I just remember being at his house and just, again, trying to just eat as little as possible because I didn't want to eat in front of him. I didn't want him to associate what I ate or how often I ate
Mhm.
with me and my body, and, have it reflect negatively on me and potentially impact the relationship. So that was something that, I kind of struggled with as well.
That must have been so stressful to be like there with your boyfriend, away from home, trying to have a good time. And then I imagine like just feeling hungry the whole weekend.
Yeah, I was thinking back to that too. There were times where I was so hungry, and I just kind of told myself, well, this is what you need to
Have to
do
do.
to essentially look and be the way that you want, because others want you to be that way.
Right.
And I think there were times, I said I was eating maybe 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day. There were times where I, would, it sounds so sad, but you'd lie in bed at night and just feel like it was still not enough. Like
Mhm.
like if it was on the 1,200 side, maybe, of that day, I would still be feeling like, oh my gosh, I ate too much. And I just remember crying and, just wishing that I didn't have to do all of that just to, I guess, be the way that
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to be at the time.
So you're going through like all this internal stress, right? And counting through your calories and laying in bed at night and feeling like 1,200 calories was too much. And at the same time, everyone's telling you how great you look and boys are asking you out. And
Yeah.
it's like, how is any human of any age, let alone a teenager, supposed to reconcile those two completely opposite experiences where one person is telling, not one person, all these people are telling you, oh, you look great. You're miserable doing what you're doing. But then you think that what you're doing, you have to keep doing. So people keep telling you you look great. And then you start to think that what you're doing is okay because people are telling you you look good. It's like, it kind of blows my mind when we pause and actually think about what a nightmare that is. And that still goes on. Like there are countless women, adults who are still dealing with that. As a teenager, when your brain is not fully developed, you're trying to socially figure out and make your way in the world, and it's already so complicated. To be dealing with that is just, it's heartbreaking and like soul crushing. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
It is. It's sad. And, obviously now knowing what I know from just getting older and obviously working with you, I think back and I just feel so sad because that version of me just didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
And knowing is like so much. So we'll get into
Yeah.
that more.
So this was happening during high school. How long did this like period go on for where you were like really restricting food, and where did that kind of take you?
Yeah, I think, it was sustainable until it wasn't. Obviously, I kind of did what I felt I had to do. And then life changes, graduated high school, college, there's the stress of that. I was a commuter, so I was driving back and forth every day. It was really long days. So I think between high school and college is kind of where I fell, quote unquote, fell off the wagon, as
Okay.
people say. I just could not keep up with, not eating that much and just being on the go, not active in the form of exercise, but movement, a lot of movement, walking around campus, just up at 7 a.m., not getting home until 8 p.m., that kind of thing. I couldn't continue doing what I was doing anymore. And so it kind of switched to the complete opposite end of the spectrum where I just didn't care anymore. I was using food as a way to cope with stress. I was just eating whatever I wanted and didn't really care about, nutrition at that point because I had restricted for so long and, went without a lot of foods that I really do enjoy. So I think that is kind of where that all or nothing kind of comes in.
Yeah.
Before it was, all I was on. I had to do everything to keep this weight off, to be the smallest version of myself. And then at that point, it was kind of like, well, it's just too hard, and I'm not even going to try. This is not meant for
Yep.
me. That
Yep.
kind of mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like living in the extremes because sometimes in a way it does sometimes feel easier to do that because you've already made the decision. This is what I'm doing. The rules are established. I know the boundaries, and then I don't have to think. I don't have to decide. I don't have to pay attention. But like those extremes, it's too much for our nervous system. It's too much for our bodies in the long run. Like as you experience with the restriction piece, like that could only go on for so long because it took so much work and effort to do that. So much mental energy, like so much stress, so much planning and rigidity and control. And it's like, well, there's a finite amount of energy that we all have. Like I talk about this all the time. Like it's our pie and it gets cut into pieces. And if you've got 2/3 of your energy and attention and time pie going towards controlling food, then there's a whole other part of your life that's not getting that. And that's only sustainable for so long. So yeah, it's not surprising that that's like what happened in terms of like the ebb and flow of things.
Yeah, and exactly. When I had restricted for so long and obviously it wasn't enjoyable. The praise I was getting was enjoyable, but the actions that I was doing was not enjoyable
Yeah.
during that time. So when I, kind of decided, forget it, I'm just gonna go back to doing what I do and kind of just honoring what I want and kind of going easier on myself. It felt nice to not have to, like you said, live in those rules anymore.
Mm.
And it was, like you said, almost to the extreme of just not even caring anymore at that point. So yeah, I think, I don't think I said, but when I, from high school or freshman year, when I had decided I'm going to lose the weight up until probably, throughout starting college, I had lost maybe about 50 pounds or so. So that was a significant amount of weight that I had lost. And then once I, kind of made the decision that it's just not, I can't keep up with this anymore. It's not sustainable. I did gain all of the weight back and then some. And I think what kind of flipped the switch for me to kind of again start to go back the other way was that a family member ended up passing away at a very young age from cancer. And, they, I guess, never really took care of themselves in that they didn't go to the doctor, they didn't get checkups and things like that. So that was kind of a wake up call for me to, kind of want to take care of my health and not just to look, a certain way. I
Mm.
wanted to get healthy, for the benefits of that. And I think it started out as that. And then it kind of, when I started working again to lose the weight and become healthier, it kind of started again to, creep into the, well, I want to look better too. So, even though maybe I reached a point where I was healthy again, it kind of, the draw of that, having the aesthetics and
Mm.
stuff took over again. So
Yeah.
that was a little bit of a different experience because for me, that was kind of when I turned to exercise. I kind of said, well, the food thing didn't really work out last time. So let me give exercise a try. And like I said, I was never really an active kid. So I was kind of starting from scratch with that. But I joined a gym. I worked with a trainer for, I think maybe one session a week, and then was just taking a lot of classes, like the group classes that they offer
Mm.
at the. And looking back, I remember that there were days where I was at the gym doing primarily cardio for gosh, close to 2 hours. Yeah. And I had at the time, it was like not a Fitbit, it was like a polar watch. You had to wear
Yeah.
like this little strap around and measures like your heart rate
Yeah.
and stuff. And so at the time I had that. And I remember there were times where I would like look down at that and it would be close to like 1,300 calories that I would be burning, over this like 2 hour period of this intense cardio. And so, yeah, I mean, I dropped the weight again, quickly. I lost about, gosh, I think 60 pounds. And food wise, it's funny because I remember back then, like I was on Snapchat and stuff, and I remember posting a snap of like we went out with friends, and it was like a plate of food, like chili cheese fries or something that was not very nutritious, but like very delicious.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember posting, and the caption that I captioned it was, "This is why I work out, so that I can eat foods like this."
Yep.
So it was kind of like my relationship with food then was kind of like, well, I'm just going to eat whatever I want and then overcompensate with the exercise. So that was kind of another extreme, I guess, that I went through.
Yeah. That had to have been, again, like really stressful to constantly, it's like either preempting the food or chasing after the food. And to know that you had to spend that much time, like to be able to find and create that much time out of the day, almost every day to do that, like that's an incredible amount of stress to live with on a daily basis.
Yeah. And once again, it was not sustainable. I was
Right.
working close to full time, still in school full time. So it was hard to keep up with that. And so, once again, it's something that worked for a while until it didn't. And then kind of found myself, again at that point, kind of like graduating college. And at that point I was with my fiance now, and we were looking to like buy a house and, just other life transitions. And again, it was something where like didn't put myself first. Food and exercise kind of fell to the wayside and kind of came into, well, there's other more important things and I'll figure it out later. And the pandemic happened. And so once again, gained all the weight back. And I just remember, like after things started getting a little bit more open again after the pandemic and being able to join a gym again, I was like, I'm gonna try again. But I kind of really was like, I don't know what else to do at this point,
Yeah.
because things that I've done have worked in the short term, but they never seem to stick.
Right.
So I was really hesitant about, trying again, but I just knew that I wanted better for myself, my health, and my happiness. So that's kind of when I decided to do that. Joined a gym. Still didn't really know what to do as far as like food, but was going to figure it out. And then, yeah, just naturally kind of happened to come into your life. And when I realized, what you did, and, I guess it seemed so different than everything that I had tried before. So I kind
Yeah.
of figured, what do I have to lose at this point?
Right.
Uh, so, kind of took the leap with you. And honestly, it's been the best thing that I've ever done, because I don't want to say I'm completely at peace, but things are so much easier now after my experience doing the coaching with you. So,
So, you know, you have had like a huge like the classic yo-yo, right? Gaining and
yep.
losing, and not just, it's tough no matter how much weight, but 50 to 60 pounds it's a lot of weight to swing and to physically go through that. So as you kind of went up and down, right? And you had gotten the feedback like, oh my God, Carissa, you look amazing. And then you gained weight. And how did people respond to that? Like, were they vocally sharing
Um,
again?
yeah, it definitely was, family. Again, they probably have good intentions, but the
Yeah.
actions are not the best. So yeah, it was a lot of family, I think at that point in time, I kind of was in a serious relationship, and I'm grateful that I have a partner who has loved me at all,
Yeah.
stages of, my physical, my mental, all of that. So
Yeah.
there wasn't that, I guess, pressure that I had when I was younger,
Okay.
as far as like potential romantic partners commenting on, my body. But yeah, from family. And then obviously, I'm 30, so I kind of grew up in like when social media was growing up and becoming a
Mhm.
thing. So back when I started, I think it was like MySpace was the only thing that was really out there. And then, kind of Facebook and Instagram came after that. So
Yeah.
I think it was less pressure and commentary from like direct commentary from other people. And it also became a little bit about like the type of social media that I was consuming, and then the inner dialogue that I had with myself. Um,
Mhm.
and just kind of like, being negative, being mean to my,
Yes.
that developed too. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you said before about like when we kind of found each other, you were like, I'd done restricting the food. I'd done the crazy exercise. And you were still in a place, obviously, where you weren't feeling good because there were no, right, there were no skills. There was just like the do everything or do nothing. And I
Right.
think I kind of think about this a lot with people who have been through these experiences for all of these years. It's like at a certain point, you get to the point where the pain of what you are currently doing to either lose weight or maintain weight or to feel some sense of control outweighs the scariness of doing something new, right? Because there's comfort in going on a restrictive diet. There's comfort in saying, I'm going to go to the gym for 2 hours, 5 days a week because it's familiar and there's a feeling that we can control it and we've made the decision and it's like in place. Doing something new, like working with a coach and like learning skills and learning how to speak kindly to yourself and starting to learn about, how being nutritious is different from it being healthy and understanding and breaking down. Like I remember when we first started working together, we talked a lot about like emotional eating and we were using like the feelings wheel to identify all of that. Like really digging into it can be terrifying. Like
Yeah.
even though in the long run it's going to be good, in the moment to let go of the things that we've done, even as damaging as they are to us, can feel really scary. And so I think like I appreciate you kind of like articulating that, like kind of getting to that breaking point where it's like, okay, well, what I've done hasn't worked. And I know that I have to do something different now, as kind of unfamiliar as it feels.
Yeah, and it was extra scary because all of the things that I had done with the, food restriction and the intense exercise, kind of getting the outcome that I wanted short term and then, long term having it not last, it damaged that self-trust. I had no
Totally.
trust in myself to be able to quote unquote do it, to actually make it happen. And so I think that was definitely a fear that came up going into coaching was, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I'm going to take this step, but I really don't know if it's going to work for me because of
Mhm.
me, and I
Yeah.
guess my quote failures in the past.
Right. And but I was just thinking like, we see them internally as failures, but the minute that someone said something to you as a kid that you needed to, that you were chubby, that you needed to stop drinking soda, that you had gained weight, like that's when the self trust gets broken, right? Because we kind of inherently are born with the skills and the awareness to understand when we're hungry and when we're full. But very, very, very early on, it's taken away because of people who mean well, who were like, oh, you have to finish everything on your plate. Oh, you can't have dessert till you eat all your broccoli. Oh, you want to have like 64 snacks all day long? Great, have 64 snacks all day long, right? And it's so immediately our innate ability to sense like hunger and fullness and know why we're eating and know what we like and what we don't like really gets stripped away. And then it can feel terrifying to rebuild it when we're feeding off of and getting our cues from external sources, whether it's other people telling us we've gained or lost weight, or seeing ads or marketing for diets, or being told how great our life is going to be when we look a certain way, or being told what foods that like candy bars are junk food and are unhealthy, and fruit and vegetables and whole grains are healthy. When it's like, it's so much more complex than that. It's very hard to have the belief and the confidence and believe that we are capable of being able to make those decisions and understand and relearn those cues. And I think personally, my 2 cents is that I think that's what holds a lot of people back from doing coaching and trying to do that work, because it does feel terrifying. In a lot of ways, it feels easier just to keep doing what you're doing, even though it sucks. So again, like this is why it's so great to have you here, like sharing your experience so people can hear like, this is what it's really like. This is what I've been through. And like, yeah, I talk about that for myself, but I also like do this work. So in a way it's a little bit different. So to hear from like you who were living it and you have your life and your career and your partner and your family and all of these things, like I really, this is a very long-winded way of me saying like, I appreciate you being like so candid and honest just about your whole experience, because it's really just so valuable for people.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for providing like such a platform for people like me to do that, to share, our struggles and our stories and our journey. I kind of hate that word, but our journey
I know, it's what it is.
with
Yeah.
these things. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. I think it's something that with coaching, it's really is a process of unlearning basically everything that you know. And the crazy thing is that what you know, or what you think is actually what's wrong. So you're
Mhm.
kind of unraveling all of that and learning kind of the right way. Well, I guess the right maybe is not the
I
right
know
word
what
to
you
use
mean.
here,
Yeah,
but yeah. But you're kind of learning, I guess, maybe the natural way, the way that things should be, and not, the, I guess, the lies and the stories that you've kind of been fed from other people and diet culture and society, and as you're
totally.
so.
So what was it like for you? Like when we started working together, kind of coming off these, I mean, over a decade of kind of up and down and food and exercise food restriction and exercise, excessive exercise. What was it like for you to kind of do something totally different that was new and unfamiliar and like just how did that feel for you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at first it was scary. I didn't know, whether or not I was going to be able to do it. I didn't have that trust in myself. But as we were kind of working, week by week, and working on building the skills, to kind of better cope with like things like stress eating, and that desire to want to jump back into, the next fad diet or whatever.
Mhm.
As we were kind of working through those skills and then putting them into action in between our sessions, that's kind of where that self-trust started to build again. I was seeing the progress that I wanted to see. I've always had a fat loss goal, has always been something,
Mhm.
um, that I've had, again, for aesthetics, but also for health reasons as well. I finally came to that understanding that it's okay to have a mixture of both. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
just one or the other. So yeah, having both and seeing progress and in the direction that I wanted, things to go as we were working through the skills and building that self-trust back. That was really powerful and for me, and I think it gave me more confidence to kind of feel like I can take control of this and do it in a way that, I'm not struggling to, I guess, that I'm not in a way that I'm not, I guess, depriving myself of anything, or no
Mhm.
restriction, no over, excessive exercise, things like that. Just kind of doing it in a way that is sustainable long term rather than short term.
Mhm. I think what you said, I'm so glad you said that like there's a lot of noise out there right now about like with anti-diet culture that you can't want to lose weight. And I find that to be so problematic because to me that takes away people's autonomy. Each of us is allowed to make the decisions for ourselves what we want to make. I think what the important where the discussion needs to be is why are you doing that, right? How does it align with your values, right? In the past, all the years before where you were either crazy exercising or restricting food, right? It was to get that positive reinforcement from someone else, to be told, oh, Carissa, you look so great. Oh, Carissa, will you go out with me? Like, but it sounds like as you kind of went through that and realized that that was just like a dead end, that now it was coming from a place where you wanted to be healthy, you wanted to feel good. And yes, like there's an aesthetic piece of it. And like, I want to feel good about how I look, but it's about how I feel about how I look, not about how someone else feels about how I look. And there's a really, really important distinction there where we derive self worth from how we feel about ourselves, not from how someone else feels about ourselves. And some people would say we should derive no self worth from how we look. I don't fully agree with that because I think that's we're humans and appearances and how we look are part of how we interact. They're part of how we interpret our surroundings and connect with people. And that's not to say that it should be the only thing, right? Can it be one piece? Yes. Is the piece you rely on the most? No. But is it part of it? Yes. As long as it's alongside the internal piece about, is this in alignment with what's important to me? Am I feeling good? Do I trust myself? Am I speaking kindly to myself, right? It needs to come alongside all of that, not just separate from it. So yeah, those I mean that's been a really big part of like my own work and I know, it sounds like for you as well.
Yeah, looking back, that internal validation and that part of it was not something that I ever considered,
Yeah.
in doing the things that I did to kind of get where I wanted to be. And that's something that I think through coaching, is something that I've started to really develop and lean into is that, internal piece of it. I'm doing what I'm doing as far as, decisions that I make around food and exercise. I'm doing them for me, because this is what I want, not because somebody else wants it for me or somebody else is telling me how to be.
Yes.
Again, don't get me wrong. It's especially now. I think now it's very, very nice to hear when somebody, has something positive to say about my appearance and my weight loss. I think, like I said, back then it was kind of, I guess, adding fuel to the fire of those
Right.
negative behaviors that I was
Right.
doing. But now I know that what I'm doing is sustainable. I know that I'm doing, what's in my actual best interest for my health and well-being. And I think now when somebody makes a comment like that, I'm just at peace with it. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it because, to get your reaction. So.
Yes. Yes. Can you share like what are some of those things, some of those skills that were really powerful for you and some of the things that you still use?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to break it down by like movement, food, and then like body image because
Great.
three components
Yeah.
to the picture. So as far as exercise is concerned, I stopped doing things that I didn't enjoy doing. I'm not a big fan of cardio. I still include it because I know there are benefits to it, but I don't force myself to do the 2 hour cardio sessions anymore. I kind of incorporate a lot of walking. I like hiking and then other forms of movement that I actually enjoy and not, movement that said, do this because this is going to help you lose the most fat or, do this because this is what all of the celebrity trainers are doing.
Mhm.
So I'm really doing a lot of like strength training. I really enjoy that. There's so much joy for me in feeling strong and feeling powerful. And it's funny because, back when I was younger and kind of going through the struggles, I always wanted to be the smallest version of myself. And I think now with strength training, I've developed some muscle. And, back then, if I had done that, gosh, I probably would have been distraught. Like, oh my God, these muscles make me look so big. But now I'm like so proud of my muscles, I'm like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
strong. Like I can lift a lot of weight, and I, in certain lighting, you can see the cuts of my muscles sometimes. And so stuff like that, really, it's leaning into forms of movement that bring me joy instead of just doing what other people tell me I should do.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then also resting too, like when my body's just not feeling it, like honoring that, not forcing myself to work out, because I said I was going to work out for X amount of hours, X amount of times a week, really resting when I feel that I need to, and trusting that, once that rest period is over, I'm just going to go right back to, what feels good and moving my body in a way that I enjoy. So that's kind of like the exercise component of things. With food, oh my gosh, there's so much around food. I never really grew up in a family that prioritized like nutrition. I mean, like I was fed, don't get me wrong. It's not that there was no, food for me to eat. It's just, it's not something that my family really paid attention to as far as nutritional values of food.
Yeah.
Um, Foods having certain jobs, as we talk about in coaching. So kind of having to learn all of that on my own as an adult, and even with coaching, prioritizing protein has been huge, especially with me doing strength training. Prioritizing protein at every meal has been a big skill for me. It's crazy when we did the sit down and actually decided to track like how much protein are you eating in a day, and it was shocking to actually calculate that up, and it was maybe like 65 grams, and you were
Mhm.
like, that's real low. So I
Mhm.
was like, wow, I've never paid attention to something like that before. So just really trying to pay attention to that. I say now, on a good day, I probably get close to 140 grams. Maybe on a day where I haven't been paying as much attention, maybe closer to like 100, but it's significantly more than what I had been before we kind of sat down and did that.
Yeah.
That uh,
So what do you just, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to interrupt
oh,
you.
you're fine.
Two questions around that, because this is something people listening are going to hear 65 grams and they're going to think, oh my God, like that's a lot, right? So it's all relative. So my two questions are, is how did you get from 65 to 100 to 140? And totally, yes, it's played a huge role, will play a huge role in your ability to build strength. Are
Mhm.
there other pieces that you felt like, how did that protein impact like other pieces around like eating and appetite and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with that part of it, with how did it impact other parts of appetite? Absolutely, feeling more full by increasing protein. Again, not something that I really ever paid attention to, and I always kind of considered myself just I'm a snacker. I like to pick throughout
Mhm.
the day. But when I made an effort to pay attention and add more protein at my core meals, I noticed that that snacking kind of just there was no desire for it. It just didn't, it wasn't something that I felt, I guess, that I needed to do because I was getting the nutrition that I needed. Um,
Awesome.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
what was the first part of your question?
Like, what was it like for you to go? Yeah. So, and that makes total sense. And it just like, it's like we talk about these things and you hear about them, but then to just actually hear like, oh yes, it actually works. Like,
Yeah.
you're not a snacker. Like, there's a reason why you're snacking. It's because you're never really full, and you're never really full because you're not getting the nutrition you need. But what was it like? So to go from 65 to 140 is a massive, massive increase. How did you do that? Like, what was it like to do that? And what was sort of your approach?
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I think I really had to start to like take a step back and look at and try to be more aware of what I was eating, when I was eating, and kind of build from there. So obviously I noticed, when I was able to kind of pause before eating meals and kind of like assess my plate, like what is in this plate, and protein was just something that consistently was lacking. So just kind of having that awareness or developing that awareness to kind of be able to evaluate my plate and say, what is missing, where can I add more, which is amazing because in the past I would be like, what can I
I
take away?
take away. Yeah,
But now it's kind of like, what can I add to either increase, my fullness and my satiety, and or what can I add to increase some enjoyment in this meal? So that's been big too, is just focusing on what I can add rather than what I can take away. Um,
totally.
yeah, and then obviously making a point to, learn protein content in different foods, and adding them in where I can to try to get that number higher. It obviously in the beginning it was harder, because it's not something that I was used to. But then as time went on, it kind of like protein is always like front of my mind now. It's
Yeah.
funny because whenever my fiance, right, and I, whenever he's like, well, what do you want to eat? I'm always like, protein. It has to have protein. I don't care what we eat, but it needs protein. So it's like our little thing now. So
Yeah.
even he's saying it now. I'm like, what do you want to eat? He's like, protein. So it's like a
Yeah.
little joke we have now.
Yeah. It is like you just your thinking starts to shift. And look, it's not about perfection. Obviously, there's going to be meals and times where there isn't protein, but on a regular basis, consistently, like that's how your brain starts to think because it makes such a huge difference. Like, I know, like, I'm not someone who can on a regular basis have like pasta as my main meal. And I think most people cannot. And then people like eat more of it than they want to or they need to. And they're like, why am I gaining weight? Why can't I lose weight? And I'm like, well, here's why. But there's protein, I feel like for some reason has like gotten this bad rap. There's so many, there's always like some new documentary coming out about, yeah, just eat like all plants. And yes, eat a lot of plants, eat a lot of vegetables, eat a lot of fruits for sure. I talk about that too. But you need protein. You need protein for muscles. You need protein to combat the loss of bone density that we have, especially as women as we age. And for fat loss, maintenance fat loss, it is incredibly, incredibly important. I would go so far as to say it's nearly impossible to sustainably lose fat without having sufficient protein. And sufficient protein is not what it says on the package, the label, right? Which is probably around like 65 grams a day. Like if you use like the little RDA guidelines,
Right.
that's like baseline for like nutritional needs for your body to survive. It's not optimal. So yeah, I just it's such a game changer and it's hard. That's why I wanted to point out what a huge
Mhm.
increase that is and that like it takes time and that doesn't happen overnight. It could take months to a year to even multiple years to make a type of increase. Like you and I worked together for an 8 or 9 months,
Yep.
which is a good chunk of time. And I know you've continued to do a lot of work since then because we finished working together in January of this year, so almost a year ago.
Right.
It takes time to make these changes. It's not like one day you start working with a coach and you're like, oh, yep, tomorrow I'm eating 120 grams of protein a day. Like, no, no. Like we take one meal at a time and you slowly build because these types of changes, they take work, they take effort. Like it's not just gonna like magically happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there, we're human. We're not perfect. There are certainly days where
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I haven't had that much protein today. And it's just half the battle is just being aware of that and then making a conscious effort, the next day
Yeah.
to to do quote unquote better.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like to keep going with what you know works.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know the third part you wanted to share was kind of like the body image piece. And I don't
Oh,
actually, there
yeah.
was other nutritional stuff. I don't want to cut you off on that either. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I mean, there are tons, but I think, one that's been a game changer for me, obviously, with my history of restricting, especially foods that, maybe don't have nutritional value and their job is more for enjoyment or connection with other people, so typically our desserts or our, really fatty foods or our carbs, not restricting those. Obviously, in the past, I did that, didn't really work. Wasn't enjoying it. So I think just giving myself that permission to have these foods while also being aware of, again, what their jobs are in terms of like fullness and nutrition and, not restricting them, but not overindulging in them either because I have other goals as far
Yeah.
as nutrition and overall health.
So how did you like, right, as someone who had gained and lost, weight several times over the course of your life, how were you able to reconcile giving yourself permission to have kind of the sweets and the desserts and whatever without being afraid that it was going to make you gain weight or impact your work on fat loss?
Yeah, that definitely was a fear going into it, of course, because with my history of restricting heavily and then not restricting anymore, the weight did come back. There are many pieces and reasons as to why that happened, but it's I think desserts and sweets and things like that always kind of take the brunt of it. Like it's the fault of that's why.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that I have a sweet tooth. So it's like one of those things where it's like, I don't have any enjoyment of cutting that stuff out. Like I genuinely do want this in my
Yeah.
life. I think for me, just really pausing and just creating space to like make decisions in the moment is such a game changer. And it's not something that I typically would do. Coming from a background of like heavily restricting foods, go out on the weekends and see this like massive dessert with like cookies and ice cream and chocolate syrup, and it's just like
Mhm.
you see it and you just like, I want it, I'm gonna have it, and then by the time you finish it, you're stuffed and you're like, oh my god, why did I eat all of
How did
that?
I
I
do
didn't
that?
want
Yeah.
all of that. So I think just kind of working on creating space to just think about what I really want with these foods and what I'm looking to get out of them has been huge. So I was able to kind of have these foods around and they just don't take up that mental energy anymore because I know that I can have them at any time when I want them. And I
Mhm.
also know that I don't need the whole thing. Like, I don't need the whole
Mhm.
candy bar. I don't need to have the whole box of cookies right now. It's actually better because you can enjoy them multiple times during the week. So
Yes. 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 I think like I mean, we've talked about this before and I've talked about it, but you just said like when I allow myself to have it and
mhm,
I stop restricting it, that's when everything changes, right? And it seems so counterintuitive
right,
because I think a lot of people are afraid, well, if I let myself have this, I won't be able to stop. I'll eat all of it. But by giving yourself permission, then you take away the urgency and you take away the pressure to have it. And then you
right,
kind of have the space to see if you even want to have it.
right,
And it's scary for sure. Like I went through that myself. I think I don't think I've worked, well, I shouldn't say that. Most clients I've worked with have been through this, where especially whether some people are like more savory thing around chips and snacks, and some people are more sweets, and some people are both, whatever your taste preference is, whatever it is, we are afraid of those foods, and those foods feel like they control us. And it's not
yeah,
until we give ourselves the permission to have them with structure in place, right? Like
of course,
there's, if you follow kind of the very formal intuitive eating approach, it's different than the way I approach things and the way we approach things. Like yes, you have permission, but we're going to do it with structure, right? It's not like if you want to have cupcakes for dinner, you have cupcakes for dinner. It's no, we're going
right,
to have a cupcake on a plate after we've had a meal that has protein and veggies and a carb in it, right? So there's structure in place, and you're going to eat it at a table, and you're going to put it on a plate, and you're going to pay attention and all of these things, and that works, right? And it's just, yeah, and it just frees up like so much of your life to like live the rest of your life instead of being obsessed with thinking about food all day long.
yeah. It's like you take your power back from these foods, and at the same time, it's not a free for all.
Totally. That's exactly it. Like you can do both.
Right.
Again, there's like these schools of thought, well, you can only do one or the other. Like you have to say, whatever, I'm just going to eat cookies all day, every day for meals. And people will do that. And people will make progress with that over time. But it can also be really, there's a lot of stuff that comes along with that. You don't
Mhm.
have to do that in order to make progress, in order to get to the other side and have peace around foods. Like, yes, it's about giving yourself permission and having the structure in place at the same time. It's
Yeah.
both and.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of segueing into the body image portion of things, but also it ties into like exercise and food is just, I think something that really impacted me from coaching was the concept of like tender and fierce self-compassion. For me, it was always one or the other. It was, with the heavily restricting and the exercising, intensely, that was kind of like too much of the like fierce self-compassion, like to the point of it's like you're damaging like your mental well-being by forcing yourself to do these things. And then on the other side, kind of in the times where in the past I would say I fell off, that was a little bit too much of the like tender self-compassion, like, oh, it's okay, like, don't worry about it, you don't have to do anything, like you
Right.
are who you are and it is what it is, and you just kind of sit there and accept it.
Yep.
Now I think through coaching I have been able to develop kind of a nice balance of both, through the skills that we've worked on and implemented. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. It's been huge for me too. And I think that's kind of like a mental trap we fall into where it's like, oh, I have to punish myself in order to change. Or it's
yes.
just like, whatever, I give up. Exactly.
Mhm.
It's complete acceptance. But the difference is like, it's accepting the things we can't control and taking action on the things that we can. Right. And so
Yeah.
that's like, that's that's like the language. Everyone has different language they take away. That's what I kind of use, right? And you mentioned tender
Mhm.
and fierce. Like it's all about what resonates with us kind of personally based on our own just personalities and lived experiences. But yeah, it's always a both and. It's like when we
Yeah.
get into those either or places and having to like choose one thing, that's where stuff goes like downhill because it's just not, humans are constructed in such a way that like yes, sometimes that black and white thinking is easy, but it's not really beneficial to us. Like we have to be willing to pay attention and stay present and make decisions and be intentional and be thoughtful, and all of that takes work. And that's, again, like I think that's why it's hard for people. But I think like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially because it's been so much time since we finished coaching. Like it takes
Mhm.
a lot of work at first, and then I think for certain things it takes less work over time. Like it takes less energy and effort. It becomes like it becomes your new autopilot in a way. And that's not to say you're checked out, but it just becomes, that becomes your default. Your old default is now gone and your new default is kind of in place.
Right. It's kind of just like your new routine at that point. You're just
Yeah.
so used to it, and it's like takes less effort, like you said. Yeah, I think for me with food and exercise, that has definitely been my experience. A lot of that now is just kind of, I don't really need to think about it. It just kind of happens through the skills that we worked on and practicing them. I think for me, where I still struggle is the body image portion of things. With food and exercise, it's a lot of like tangible skills that you can practice. It's something you physically are doing versus body image, where all of it is mental.
Yep.
It's the mental work, and that's often the hardest work to do. So for me, the body image portion of it is kind of still where I struggle. And that's not to say that, like you failed me as a coach, or I failed as the person being coached. It just goes to show like how insidious and how deeply rooted this stuff is in our
Totally.
society, and just from, my experiences growing up. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It takes, I mean, I do this for a living and every day I have to do work around body image. Like I have to work skills that I know work for me. I don't think it's something that you ever check the box. I think it's something we will do collectively until the day we die. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Do we wish that things were different and there was more body diversity and a wider range of bodies represented and less expectations and less people commenting on how we looked? Like, yes, but the reality is like none of that is going to change.
Right.
And so it's up to us individually to take care of ourselves and to learn the skills because it's work and it ebbs and flows, and some days and weeks and months are harder than others, but just knowing that there is a way to respond to it, there is a way to manage it, I think in and of itself is comforting, right? It's not like a sentence, like a like a sentence for the rest of our life, meaning like, well, this is just how it is. Like, I'm just going to have to be miserable and hate the way I look and like barely be able to look at myself in the mirror every day for the rest of my life. Like, that's not true. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. But yeah, I think it for sure is ongoing work. And I think normalizing that is also really important. Like, there's no finish
Yeah.
line, there's no box that gets checked, there's no like, I graduated, like, I'm all good. It's just, that's not what being a human is.
Right. And I think another component of it too is that, we see negative body image and then we see like positive body image, like what is it? Yeah, the body positive movement.
Mhm.
And it's like you have to love yourself at all different stages and like, never think anything badly of yourself. I think that's just not realistic for a lot of
No way.
people, especially people that have had experiences similar to mine growing up,
Yep.
and even in their adult lives. And I think for me, progress in the body image realm has been shifting my negative body image and the perspective that I had to more of a neutral stance, where I'll have days where, I notice I have a negative thought about my body, but it's something that kind of I'm able to work through in the moment and kind of get it to just acknowledge it and then kind of move on from it. Not to say that I'm completely 100% happy with the way that I look all of the time. Certainly have good days where I do feel that way. I think just being more neutral about my body for me, it has been incredible because coming from a place where it's always been negative.
Yes. Yes. Where you're just expending less energy on thinking about your body and the way that your body kind of controls your thoughts and your behaviors and the way you're kind of
Yeah.
interacting with the world, because it very often does. And I think what you just shared, and maybe you can talk just a little bit about this, is where you are right now, like in terms of your body and how you've kind of been like up and down and sort of, right? I know kind of when we had left off, you were in a place where you were kind of like feeling good about where you were in terms of like weight and size and shape and all of that. And even with that, there's still body image struggles, right? Even when you get to a
Yeah.
place where you're like, oh, like, my clothes are fitting well and I'm feeling good, those thoughts are still there, right? There's no like end point where you get to like a quote certain body and all that goes away. Like, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely has been my experience where, I'm proud of the progress that I've made. And there are times where, I have a day where I'm looking and that voice in the back of my head, challenges me and says, oh, it's still not enough. Keep doing more. Maybe try this a little bit different. Maybe restrict a
Mhm.
little bit of this. Like the thoughts and like the noise is there. But the difference now is that I really don't let it control my actions anymore. So that has been so like liberating for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's something that people expect that, maybe if I do this work, I'm never going to have this noise. I'm not going to feel this way anymore. And it's just, I've found that that's not true, but I think
Mhm.
you're better able to, I don't want to say cope, but you're better able to kind of handle it when that comes up. You're better able to logically, rationally work through it rather than just giving in to the emotion of it and,
Totally.
letting it take you down.
Yep. Yeah. There's like the skills to respond. The thoughts are going to come because that's how our brains are wired. And sometimes they can decrease in volume and decrease in frequency. For most of us, they're always going to be there. And it's being able to respond to them. Right. And like you said, like they're not controlling what I do. They're not controlling how I feel about myself. They're not controlling my behavior. And that's like life changing.
It's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think
liberating is a great word.
liberating. Yeah, it's been so freeing. Like you said, it frees up so much mental space and energy for other things, which
Yeah.
is something I never realized that like I needed,
Yeah.
until after I did coaching, and I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
So yeah. So and I think in the realm of body image, like you said, I think that's the portion of the three that I still struggle the most with. But some of the skills that work for me when I'm having a kind of more of a negative body image day, I really do try to just like lean into appreciating and acknowledging my body for what it can do rather than what it looks like, or
Mhm.
sometimes even in spite of what it can look like. There's this narrative out there of, larger bodies just don't perform as well in exercise, or, it's like a stigma to be like a larger body and moving. It's like, it's crazy because I saw something on social media. It's like, when you're in a larger body, they want you to go to the gym. They want you to like put in this effort. And then when you do, you're criticized for either doing it wrong or like, your body is not the type of body that should be doing this movement.
Yep.
And it's a catch 22. It's like you can't win. So just really trying to lean into appreciating my body for what it can do for me is really has really been impactful for me.
Yeah.
And then also just following, trying to kind of curate. For me, social media is something that, while I would love to be social media free, I recognize that it's not something that I can do. And a lot of like my generation and younger generations are not going to be able to. We just grew up with it. So it's always going to be this part of, our lives. And I think for me, something that's been big for me and my body image is making sure that I'm following people that represent a diverse group of, bodies, whether it's, race or size or people with disabilities. Like, I think for me, it has been very impactful to kind of curate my social media feed to represent, lots of various different body types. And that's allowed me to kind of make peace with my body too.
Yeah.
So,
Totally, totally with you. That's been a game changer for me as well. And just seeing a wider representation and being reminded every day that it's normal for bodies to look all these different ways. There's not only
right.
one way for a body to look.
Right.
Because again, we're taught that. That's one of these things we're taught from such a young age. It's so deeply ingrained into our understanding of the world that we need constant reminders around that. And now with the age of social media, which will obviously this be the rest of eternity,
Yeah.
we're seeing all of this so often. It's even more important to make
Yeah.
sure that we're also filling that space with people that we see ourselves reflected in them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to share that we didn't cover that you were like, oh, I wanted to talk about this? I just wanted to leave some space for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just like to say that for anybody, if anybody listens to this, anybody listening is hesitant about doing coaching or just isn't sure if it's for them, if they're not sure, that they can do it, like you're hearing from somebody who had the exact same thoughts as you. And I am now here on the other side of, 8 to 9 months of working, with you, Jordana. And, I can confidently say that I am the happiest that I have been in my body with food, with movement, and I truly do feel that it is because of the work that you and I did together, the skills that we developed and putting them into action and just challenging everything that I had been taught, up until then. So for anybody who's hesitant about it, I wholeheartedly support, you taking this step for yourself. And I think it's something that I don't allow myself to say a lot, but I think the past versions of me that had these struggles like would look at me now and just be so proud. So
That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Like
yeah.
you were willing to do the hard work and get uncomfortable and show up day after day after day. And you're still willing to do that. And that's really what it's about. So I'm just incredibly grateful for you and for our time together and for you to share all of this today so publicly with people, like is such a huge service to so many women. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, thank you for creating a safe space for people like me to share our stories and to do this work. So.
Oh, wait, you know what? Let me just